I often hear people say that movies or characters that touch on mental illness portray it in a bad light. They always make mentally ill people look like killers. I understand that reaction. I understand that people don't want to see illness connected to violence and that they're tired of stigma. But when I look deeper, when I think through the lens of my own life with trauma, poverty, disability, and a body that has lived on survival mode for years, I see something very different. When I watch Joker, 2019, or when I build a character inspired by Ede Jane, I don't see a story about a madman. I see the anatomy of neglect. I see a human nervous system collapsing under years of deprivation. I see a person who was never allowed to regulate, never allowed to feel safe, never offered help. Every time Arthur Fleck asked for care, the system gave him bureaucracy. Every time he smiled to hide his pain, the world laughed at him. And when he finally broke, society called him the monster, not the world that built the cage. That's what I see too, when I study Ede Jane. Not as a fan, not as someone who condones what he did, but as someone who wants to understand what makes human beings fracture this way. He wasn't born evil. He was born into isolation, manipulation, and religious terror. He was a child who never learned safety. And when his mother died, the only person who ever defined his world disappeared, leaving behind an empty shell of attachment and shame. That doesn't excuse the violence that followed, but it forces us to look at the long chain of trauma that leads to harm, not just at the last, catastrophic moment when it explodes. Why I embody this through art. When I put makeup on, when I stand in front of the mirror to explore a character like Ede Jane or Arthur Fleck, I'm not becoming them. I'm meeting the parts of myself that understand despair. I'm letting my dissociative system, my alters, my fragments, my survivors, explore pain safely through creativity. I don't do this outside my home. It's private, reflective, and deeply somatic. It's how I process memories of abuse, control, and fear. It's how I work through the nervous system imprint of being told I was unwanted, being isolated, being gaslighted into believing that my body and my emotions were wrong. People often misunderstand that. They think, oh, she's glorifying violence. No. What I'm doing is studying how violence is born and how it can be stopped. In forensic psychology, researchers talk about the pathway to violence. It's not a straight line, it's a slow corrosion. Trauma right arrow, neglect right arrow, isolation right arrow, fantasy right arrow, collapse. Most people who commit violence have histories of severe victimization, head injuries, malnutrition, or attachment trauma. Their nervous systems learned fear before they ever learned love. That doesn't make them innocent. It makes them products of systems that failed them, the same way those systems fail millions of others in quieter ways every day. Criminology, justice, and the myth of the monster. Society loves the story of the monster. It's easier to point at one person and say, that's evil, than to admit that evil is often structural. The real horror isn't the act itself. It's the decades of warning signs ignored, the poverty untreated, the mental health care unfunded, the culture that teaches boys that tenderness is weakness, the religion that teaches women that control equals purity. In criminology, this is called structural violence, the harm built into our social systems. It's the violence of poverty, racism, colonization, and ableism. It's the way entire populations are kept in survival mode, their nervous systems burning out under chronic fear, scarcity, and humiliation. When someone finally breaks under that weight, we isolate them further, in prisons, in psychiatric wards, in the public imagination. We never ask what broke them. We never ask what could have been different. The justice system does not heal. I've read case studies, testimonies, and court transcripts. What I see is not justice, it's ritualized punishment. It's a machine designed to manage pain, not heal it. The criminal justice system doesn't look for causes, it looks for culprits. It doesn't repair communities, it extracts confessions. It doesn't rehabilitate, it reproduces trauma. And yet, when people like me try to talk about this, we get silenced. We're told that understanding is excusing. But understanding is the opposite of excusing. It's the beginning of accountability. Because if you don't know why harm happens, you can't stop it. That's why transformative justice matters so much to me. It asks the questions punishment refuses to ask. What happened to this person before the harm? What were they missing? What needs to change so this doesn't happen again? How can everyone involved, survivors and perpetrators alike, find some form of healing? Transformative justice refuses the idea that anyone is disposable. It says, even those who cause harm deserve to be understood because they were harmed too. It doesn't mean forgiveness, it means truth. The nervous system as a mirror of society. The body keeps the score, not just individual bodies, but collective ones. A traumatized society breeds traumatized people. Colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, these are nervous system assaults on entire populations. They keep people in constant fight or flight, hungry, scared, ashamed, competing for survival. That's why I say I'm literally in danger, even when there's no knife in my hand or threat outside my door. Because poverty itself is a slow-motion threat. Because eviction, hunger, medical neglect, those are dangers too. They keep the body in alarm mode. And the longer we stay there, the harder it is to think, connect, or heal. That's what people don't understand when they tell me, your dissociative disorder will probably go away soon. It won't, because I'm still living inside the same conditions that created it. Because my nervous system is still fighting for survival in a world that treats the poor, the disabled, and the traumatized as disposable. Why I study the dark figures. When I turn to stories like Joker or Ede Jane, I'm not looking for monsters. I'm looking for mirrors. I'm asking, what does this reflect about the world that raised me? I'm exploring how pain turns into mythology, how society externalizes its guilt by calling some of us evil, while ignoring the evil it does daily in polite, bureaucratic ways. I don't find horror in blood. I find horror in paperwork that denies food aid. I find horror in the landlord who threatens eviction. I find horror in hospitals that turn away the poor, in welfare offices that lose files, in social workers who minimize suffering because it's too much to witness. That's the real haunted house, the one made of policies instead of walls. So when I embody Ede Jane, I'm not reenacting his acts. I'm reclaiming his ghost as metaphor. I'm saying, this is what neglect looks like when it metastasizes. I'm giving shape to the invisible violence that continues around us. And by transforming it into art, I make it speak instead of kill. Art as embodied forensic empathy. I think of what I do as forensic empathy. It's like walking through the ruins of a human psyche and asking, where did the fire start? It's not sensationalism. It's investigation through compassion. And as someone with DID, I know what it means to have parts of the self that feel alien, frightening, misunderstood. To me, exploring Ede Jane is exploring the part of humanity that was exiled, the part that everyone denies exists until it bursts out in horror. If we could meet that part with empathy, in ourselves and in others, maybe we wouldn't need to keep recreating it. The real monsters. The real monsters are not the people who broke. The real monsters are the systems that made breaking inevitable. They wear suits. They sign policies. They criminalize poverty. They medicalize difference. They profit off pain. They are the ones who make the rest of us look crazy for reacting to unbearable conditions. Why I will keep doing this work. That's why I will always defend stories like Joker and even my exploration of Ede Jane. Not because they are perfect, but because they dare to look at the rot we all live inside. Because they make the invisible visible. Because they turn stigma into dialogue, pain into understanding, horror into humanity. We cannot prevent harm by hiding it. We can only prevent it by facing it, honestly, compassionately, and collectively. Understanding pain is the opposite of glorifying it. It's how we stop repeating it. That's the kind of justice I believe in. Not punishment, not shame, but transformation through empathy, art, and truth.